All right, let's talk about the Insurrectionist next door. I'm a documentary filmmaker myself, so I look at documentaries from a filmmaking perspective as well as from an audience perspective. And I got to tell you, this movie was a huge disappointment. I probably wouldn't have even looked at it, except that it's kind of been viral here on this platform with people reacting to it, talking about it, that kind of thing. So the first thing is, this is directed by Nancy Pelosi's daughter. And the first thing that she does, as not being a filmmaker, not understanding the process of making documentary film, the first thing that she does is include herself in the film. Now, there's no doubt that she has a dog in the race. She has a very important part to play within the story of what happened on January 6th. But she doesn't give any of her own backstory. She doesn't talk about why she's included in the film. All she does is include herself in the Q&As with people. She does these things conversationally and makes herself a part of the story. If you see on the poster here, she's even included herself on the poster. That's the first mistake young documentary filmmakers and inexperienced documentary filmmakers of all ages do, is take the focus away from their actual subject and put it on themselves. If your subject is that important and your story is that good, you should keep the focus on the subject and not be so egotistical, so narcissistic to include yourself and pull the spotlight over to yourself. It is a challenging thing to do. It requires a lot of forethought, a lot of pre-production work, a lot of planning to do that, to be able to tell a story in a narrative flow without including yourself in the films. But that's part of what being a documentary filmmaker is. All right, so with that in mind, we have what I call a survey of characters. There's zero narrative flow to this movie whatsoever. It does not have a beginning, middle, and end. And it could have, very easily, with a little bit, again, more pre-production, more planning. It could have. And instead, what we have is basically like a trip through the zoo, where you stop at each stall and look at the animal and move on. There's no depth to this film because there's no narrative flow. There's no story to follow. And the questions are so base and so surface, they really come off as Pelosi's daughter being mad and wanting an excuse to rail on these people. Now, I understand that. I'm mad at them too. Watching these people, I felt anger, I felt disgust, and I felt sadness. And so I get all of those feelings. But when you're making a documentary film, the onus is upon you to make a film, regardless of your personal feelings. As humans, there's no way for us to not have bias. You can try really hard, and as a documentary filmmaker, you probably should, because that's the difference between making a documentary film and making a propaganda piece, is being objective, or as objective as possible. That said, we're humans, so we're going to be having a bias. That's part of being human. But as a documentary filmmaker, you should work hard against that. Now, I'm not saying she should have done anything to prop these people up. They don't deserve that. But she should have worked harder to give us, the audience, more depth. She should have deconstructed these people more, dug in deep. All she did was say, oh, you had a dysfunctional childhood. Oh, you've been to prison, and then you stormed the Capitol. It's so shallow and so base and so disappointing. She had resources that none of us have. She could have gone so much deeper and done a real film. I'm barely talking. I'm so angry about this. I'm barely able to speak about it. But she didn't. All she did was go from one subject to the next, get a very basic backstory on them, and then put herself on camera to rail against them. And I understand that. If it was me and I wasn't making a film, I would do that too. But she's making a film. This is, at the end of the day, a very poorly made documentary. It is worth watching because you do get to see these people, and it is interesting to see them. But at the end of the day, you don't feel fulfilled because there's not a story here. There's no depth here. It's a very shallow end of the pool observation of the giraffes at the zoo.